Hey guys, my name's Brian Krogsgaard, and we're going to do a live episode of LedgerCast. Thank you for joining me. We're going to do a little bit of a market update, and then also I'll take some questions to get things out of the way. No, I'm not a crypto all-star. It's been taking over the internet today, but we'll do what we can anyway. So thanks for joining me, and why don't we get to it? So first of all, thanks for being here. I'm glad you survived the dip sub 6K. I'm assuming that considering that you're on this chat right now, you have not given up. So props to you. A lot of people were victims to the fall from $20,000 Bitcoin, and they saw their portfolios fall apart. It's an unfortunate part of the market. They say that money goes from the masses and goes to the few. So that's just how it goes. All right, let's start with a market update. What we're seeing in Bitcoin first, and then also what I think that's doing in terms of other markets. So you can see here we've got Bitcoin on the 4-hour pulled up. I look at Bitcoin on several different time frames, and then I also look at it with several different exchanges. I've got it pulled up on the 4-hour cloud because I think it gives us a decent amount of candle information. And I'm showing the cloud purely for the sake of being able to show some trend identification. You can see this wasn't talked about a whole lot. I don't know why. But on February 9th, there was a TK bullish cross using the doubled cloud. So this is Josh Olszowicz's custom settings that he kind of spearheaded. And there was a bullish cross on the 9th. And people have rightfully been a little worried about whether this has been real, whether we were going to retest lows. I saw a lot of calls for double bottoms. Personally, I don't think that a double bottom is the type of thing that you would see in a scenario like this. I feel like we would have either seen a higher low or a lower low, meaning to retest even below where we'd gone already. Historically, a 4-hour TK bullish cross like that is indicative of some trend reversal. You can see we've completed an edge-to-edge trade today. However, it's not too far from where the price was at the time of the cross, so it did come back down, and you can see it just went right along that resistance line that the cloud highlights. A lot of people, they don't like the cloud. The cloud does give you a lot of free information, though, so you can kind of see how it has ridden the Tinkin here and completed an edge-to-edge trade, and we faced resistance up here in this 9,300, 9,400 range. There was also a lot of talk about whether this was a head and shoulders, whether it was a head and shoulders that failed, all that kind of stuff. In my opinion, this was a pretty decent head and shoulders. It is on a diagonal. That's not as great as if it was, purely on a horizontal. You might be able to claim that this is a little head and shoulders action on its own, but it fits better when it's on that trend line on a slight downward diagonal. Overall, I feel pretty good about Bitcoin here in terms of not making new lows. It's no guarantee. I do think if we go down again, we've now created a little bit of a support line between 8,000 and 8,400, that kind of range. Personally, I think when we were in this zone, maybe like 8,400, 8,500, I had gotten back fully in the market, and then I went back to USD with a little bit of money, but the severity of this dip wasn't really enough to make that worth very much. So I did make a couple of purchases. using USD. I noted on Twitter that I bought Ethereum Classic with some of that, and then also a little bit of Bitcoin, but really my Bitcoin bids didn't hit. So by the time I felt like we were relatively safe, which was in this region, felt like we were going to have some good moves. So I moved fully back into the market. If you're conservative, you may be looking to take some profits now. We're not just going to rocket back up to $20,000. It's going to take a while to retest some of these highs. There's a lot to do between now and then. I'm going to go to a different chart. This one I'm using BitMEX's perpetual swap. This is really just an index of its own. I'm going to take off the cloud here while I'm at it. I sent out this chart to the Telegram where I've been sharing some additional insights. The reason I wanted to share this one was because I think it kind of highlights where the battle zone is going to be over the coming weeks, especially on lower time frames. This grouping over here shows us where a lot of action is going to be. You can also see once we kind of fell down from this support base up here, there was another battle, if you will, in this region. And so now we're working our way back up into this zone. So I think we'll continue to see some chop. This is what I would consider this 11.4 to 11.8, 12,000. This range is what I'm looking at for the end of February for the area where we'll be targeting. There's going to be diagonal resistance. If we break that diagonal that goes all the way from the top, if we break that diagonal, a lot of people will be calling for new highs. You know, they'll say, okay, we should start gearing up, go towards these new highs in May or June or whatever it is. But this isn't going to be immediate. It's going to take some time. However, I've been personally encouraged by what we've seen so far, that we haven't yet seen a retest. We could go back down and scare some folks. That's totally possible. However, I think it's more likely that we're going to create a new baseline of support somewhere in here, somewhere in that 8,000 to 9,000 region. If we go below 8, then the 74, 7,500 zone, again, you're finding support from over here. That's what we're going to be looking at. So another thing I mentioned was that yesterday it seemed like a lot of people started paying attention to other things. It was a quiet day for Bitcoin, but also some of people's concerns seemed to go away some. And we will we'll just kind of see how that goes. You know, as soon as volatility is not there, then people like to get excited about what alts are doing, which alts are doing what. We've seen a few different alts start to move pretty hard. Ethereum Classic had a strong move, and several others for various reasons. What I've been interested in is the fact that it's not an all or nothing thing. So, you know, when every alt exploded after there was a clear move of money from Bitcoin from the 20,000 region down to 16, people said, okay, well, this part of the run is over, bam, and it just went into those depressed alts, and we saw a huge run. It didn't really matter which alts you held. Now it's going to matter a little more which alts you're holding. You could see moves on some and not moves on others. I don't think that you're going to benefit as much from having what I would call like an index of the market. So your choices are going to be more important in terms of which alts that you go after. So, you know, if you're holding 15, 20, 25, 30, whatever number of coins, just consider that, and consider whether you can, one, react better to changes. This is a lesson that I've learned recently, where enough of my portfolio, maybe 20 or 30%, was in a long tail that was really hard to react to market changes. So I didn't have an opportunity to sell things when they were breaking support, unless I had kind of pre-created what those stop loss areas would be. Yeah, somebody's noting in the chat that Ripple's moving now. we're seeing some news-based events come out. I think we're going to continue to see people release things, make announcements. Alts are going to be battling for attention if they feel like Bitcoin has recovered to the degree where they can release something, it doesn't get lost in the fray and it dumps anyway. The people that run these coins, they don't necessarily want to see these huge, massive spouts or bouts of velocity, but they do want to see their coin succeed. And part of what it means for a coin to succeed is for the price to go up. So we should see people start to release news, updates, and other things. Maybe if you've seen some fallen roadmaps, that was probably due to the bear trend that we've been in and we're technically still in. Until some of the mid-level timeframes on Bitcoin start to turn around. So right now we're working through a bearish cloud on that Bitcoin chart, on that 4-hour even, and certainly on the daily. So it's gonna take a while before we reverse this trend. So we're in a bear trend, but I'm personally bullish on Bitcoin, so I'm not overly worried. I would guess if we continue upward momentum, by the time we get to this zone, this 4-hour cloud will be green again. The daily will take a while. It just really became a red cloud. Another note to make about targets, you can see this was inadvertent, but where I made that circle for the target is also where this cloud twists. When the cloud twists like that, that is a sign that there is not a lot of support or resistance in that zone. It's the type of place where you can, where the price can move through it without as many barriers. When you see those big thick clouds, it's a lot harder for the price to move through it. So I really do like that as a target over the next couple of weeks. So a slow upward trajectory, certainly with some tests and scares and whatever else. Sorry, I know this is not the prettiest chart, but I think it gets the point across. Another thing to note, you can see the Kijun here. It really hasn't curled down much. Now these are slower settings, so they're going to take longer to adapt to what the price action is. But the doubled cloud, it still gives us a target. The price is going to want to find the Kijun. It's going to be hungry to return to the mean. That was the topic of the podcast that we did a couple of weeks ago. And you can see when it does, it really likes to touch on that. That'll be a big point of resistance, but it also means that it's a price target. So this may move down, but right now it's roughly at 13,000. May move down over the coming days. So maybe by the time we get to this zone, the Kijun itself will be around there as well, which will be even more indicative that it's a possible target. So I want to take your questions. I don't have a whole lot to say specifically right now in terms of what some of these alts moves are, but if you have questions about specific ones, then I can take those and we'll go from there. I'm going to move this chat out though so I can see. So I'll keep an eye out for what you've got for me. For the most part, though, this is a good time to get some work done, I guess, because there's a lot of sideways action. You should be able to feel, relatively comfortable if you re-entered the market in your positions that you have. If you were still in the market, you never exited, then you're probably feeling some comfort now just by the fact that things look a little more steady. I wouldn't get complacent, but a lot of people are still really interested in Bitcoin, and there's much to be excited about. All the fundamentals look better than they ever have, so I'm happy about that. All right, so I'm getting questions about a couple of different coins. We're getting Zcash, Litecoin, Gbyte, and I do not know that one. Ledger does love sideways Bitcoin, that's for sure. No, I do not speak Spanish. All right, so let's get started. Let's talk about Litecoin. and I'll talk about Litecoin because I really haven't paid very much attention to it. So I just know it's gone up. We've talked about Litecoin in the past in terms of, historically, if you bought Litecoin when it was at 0.01, and if you sold it when it was at 0.02, then you probably did pretty well. All I've seen is that it has been going above 0.02, so it's starting to really get above some historical resistance, which is indicative that it may have more room to run. I think there was some fundamental news in terms of Arizona taking crypto as payment for people's taxes. I don't know how much of a part of everything that was. And then another piece of Litecoin news that we had today was that Coinbase for Commerce came out, which kind of looks like the Stripe interface, but for sending crypto. I'm personally really excited about that because I might implement this as part of the Ledger Status Learn program that I'm putting together, which you can go to ledgerstatus.com/learn and learn more about that, to talk to people about how to trade crypto. So I'll look at Litecoin with you. I do like I said, I like to keep the cloud on, especially as I'm getting a idea of what we're looking at. Yeah, this is similar to what I remember. I think last time I looked at it was in here. And this is some just weird, I'd say this is a random walk concept. So it's not a strong trend. It's just kind of moving around. And I would say that's due to the fact that Litecoin versus the dollar moves similarly to Bitcoin. So what you saw here was really just a non-trend ranging time period over the past couple of months for Litecoin that is really more just a reflection of the fact that it's doing basically the same thing as Bitcoin until today or yesterday, this daily. So last night, I think is when it started moving, and it's moved really hard. It's gone up 20% on this 24-hour period. So that's pretty severe. In terms of what that means, I don't know. Like, we could, if we're seeing a new paradigm, I did see someone on Twitter mention that as a possibility for several coins, where they had indicated that some of the coins out there, I don't remember what this flash crash deal is. Some coins out there, even in the big dip, they were still kind of at the top of their market cycles. So Monero was another one that's been doing that. So the fact that Litecoin didn't lose a ton of value relative to Bitcoin during this time, during this big dip, didn't go back down to 0.01, really maintained above 0.014. That's a potential sign of strength for Litecoin, and that it could have a significant shift up like it did at the beginning of last year. So maybe we're getting to the point where 0.02 is going to be the new 0.01. It's hard to say yet. I would have a hard time personally buying into Litecoin right now, just because it's had such a serious move over the past few 4-hour periods. If you do want to buy into that, and you know there's nothing wrong with that, you're buying into a positive trend. But when you do so, maybe do so as it bounces off the Tinkin. Or if you want to look at like a moving average, look at the 50 moving average on like a 4-hour time frame, something like that. This is another time where you might want to switch to singled settings if it helps much or at all. It doesn't really on this scenario. It's just moving too fast, so it's still above those as well. But it's 0.022. If you really wanted into this, just be careful, monitor that. It could be starting to form a pennant of some sort here and then looking for another move. So personally, this is a no trade zone on Litecoin for me, unless I was looking to take some profits. But since I don't hold it, I would consider this a no trade zone. So yeah, that's kind of my take on Litecoin. Let's see. The other one someone asked about was Gbyte. That's probably either because you've had it before or you saw that I shilled it earlier on Twitter. I'm going to look at this one on the daily because it's what I would call a good daily setup. The low time frame doesn't really matter to me. So this coin, honestly, from a fundamentals perspective, my understanding is that it's pretty good. I don't care that much personally. I did enough research, but I would put this in the bucket of pretty good platform fundamentals. But for the most part, I was buying a chart, and I did like the chart. You can see this switched to a bullish cloud back in mid-January. I'm not sure that this is a perfect fractal, but it might be. One of my favorite things about this is actually a representation of something that is much more ridiculous when you get out of log. So if you get out of log, we're at 0.07. The all-time high is at 0.4, basically, just under 0.4. This is the supply on this coin is really, really low. So it doesn't fit the narrative of, a coin under a dollar will pump. This is a much different narrative. However, in terms of upward potential and meeting potential targets, I think it's got a lot of potential. You can see here it's up against this resistance that's created from this zone back in August and September. Anytime where you can see the price really bunch up in the past, that's going to create these target zones. In the cloud, those usually tend to turn into what we would call ledges. So if you're in the cloud, you're bullish. Now you're saying, okay, well, where am I going to go up here? This is just blue sky. You have this price action, and if you can't read that price action for what it is, just looking at those horizontal levels and whatnot, the cloud can give you hints for that. So you can see these are cliffs right here, 0.0723-ish. This is another cliff right here, around 0.15. This is another cliff right here, around 0.21. These are target zones that you could look at as points of resistance and places where this coin could go. Another way that you could analyze a chart like this would be to use fibs. So you can use fibs multiple ways. You can go like this in terms of being retracements and how far something will go down. You could do something silly like this and go all the way to the all-time high and where it retraced to. So if you felt like this was going to reach new highs, each of these fib levels would be a point of resistance. And you can see the 0.236 is roughly where it consolidated here. I don't know. This is kind of a ridiculous way to look at it. But you can move these fibs around and look at them in different ways. You just pick a peak, pick a valley. This is one of the goofy things about fibs is that depending on what time frame you're looking at, what your 0 is and what your 1 is, it's going to give you different targets. Good advice I've heard is to kind of leave your old fibs on. So if you're looking at this in lower time frames, you might look at the January high and then the recent low. So that gives you more immediate targets of what your potential resistance will be moving up. Usually a 0.618, something like that as an extension is a good zone to look at for near-term resistance. Anyway, so I like Gbyte a lot. Again, this is the single cloud that we've been looking at. You can see it's about to recross. So it had a bearish cross on the Tinkin and the Kijun. It's about to recross, and the double never did create a bearish cross. So that helps you see how the slower settings on doubled settings are going to give you greater trend confirmation. So it's going to be slower to turn bull. It's going to be slower to go bear. Meaning if you were to only act on doubled settings, then you're going to catch less of the move because you don't exit until it's already drawn down a good bit. You're going to get in later because you didn't enter until it gave you positive signs to enter. So sometimes I like to act. I like to make my initial purchases or my sells based on singled settings if I'm using a strictly cloud strategy, and then use the doubled settings for my targets. You can see too the cliffs that it created that I was talking about earlier. They're similar, but a little different. I joked on Twitter that I was going to be pissed if this didn't hit 0.2. That was based on this cliff, and then also these kind of second tier highs that it created in the past. So that's Gbyte. I really like it. It's up to you in terms of whether it's one that you want to give a look to or go after. I can't make that call for you. All right. I lost our questions. Here they are. XRP, bullish cloud bear. If you can't read that price action, you're probably a cloud trader, is what Crypto Cred said. Reading directly from price action is something that takes time. You have to learn that over time. You have to catch an eye for it. The cloud is certainly the lazier way to do things. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think there's a lot to learn from learning multiple strategies. However, I personally don't like to use a lot of drawing tools. I like when things they take my subjectivity out of the calculation. And if you use the cloud, if you use moving averages, it takes your own personal bias of what you may draw out of the calculation. So that's why I like it. But it shouldn't be your only tool. You can see we're moving up onto the 200-day moving average here as well. So this should be a point of resistance. It was before. So Gbyte 0.08, place to watch. If you were looking to enter on something like this, you might look to see once it breaks above the 200 and then buy the retest. So maybe your purchase would be 0.08. Of course, that's more expensive, a little more expensive than it is right now. So you'd be paying more, but then you're getting confirmation that it broke out, because the other option for Gbyte here is to just go back down, test the 50 or the 100 again. So consider those types of things when you're looking to make a purchase. So I've got another question. What are my thoughts on, well, there's lots. LBC, DGB, am I still holding my trust and power bags? I'm not holding my power bag. Unfortunately, it broke down from a triangle that it was in, some consolidation. It was really poor timing. I waited until I could scrape myself out of it. I think it came back and tested the bottom of it or something. That was part of my consolidation into fewer bags. I'm sure it will do something crazy now. It has permission to moon now that I'm not in it. I still have trust. I sold some of it, but not all of it. It's really taken a beating. I feel like all the Ethereum tokens, they did really great, and then they seem to get hit harder than other coins, which was sad. All right, I got asked about Zcash, so I'll talk about that one. I want to look at Zcash in two ways. First, let's look at it's actually three ways. Oh, that's the RX. So you can see I've got this is my old color scheme here. You can see I was looking at this in terms of the fibs for potential targets. It looks like it worked its way above the 1.618, almost to the 2.618. Basically, in terms of the dollar, Zcash's recent move was a reaction off of this diagonal, essentially going back to where it had previously been consolidating and then breaking back up, kind of getting itself out of that. We'll have to see if Zcash can get up here again in the $500-600 range and what it does there. In terms of the dollar, it doesn't tell me a whole lot, but it's not bad. Versus Bitcoin, it's doing a kind of a classic Zcash move of heads and shoulders everywhere. People have been looking at this head and shoulder setup. For what it's worth, the head and shoulder pattern is just a reversal pattern where you create one shoulder in a dip and a low, then you create the next shoulder in a lower low, and then by creating a higher low after that, you're indicating that there's less sell pressure on the asset. Buyers get into a little more control. This usually is going to match a descending volume profile as it goes along. And then as it completes and retests the neckline, which it looks like Zcash is doing right now. So versus Bitcoin, depending on kind of where you draw that, it looks like this might actually be in a pretty good buy spot. Of course, you can see it's also tested against the 200. Maybe that's just a natural place for it to have reached some degree of resistance. Your risk reward here, though, is probably pretty good. There's some support here that it kind of broke through historically. Let me get these moving averages out of the way. We can turn on the cloud if we want to look at it like that. Never mind, the cloud disappeared. I don't know where the cloud went. Cloud broke it. This one's funny. This one has a cloud on it. So I keep this just as a fun reminder of what my ideas were for the market versus what the market's ideas were for itself. I got out of Zcash when it broke down from that. I bought it back over here, did a couple of quick things with it. I haven't been in it in a while. In terms of, so here's that level on the head and shoulders. It could come down, scare people off of it a little bit, maybe bounce off that Tinkin, but you can see it's looking to exit the cloud. Look at as the cloud is flipping bullish. So this could be a full bull by 0.06 or so using doubled settings. You could switch to singled settings. I'm using a custom cloud script here, by the way, that Crypt, F Crypt, I think he is on Twitter. See, this is another good example of where the singled cloud gives you a little bit better of a hint of what's happening. This would already indicate that this is bullish. This meets all the criteria in terms of the cloud to show that it's a buy. I think your risk reward on Zcash is pretty good right now. I wouldn't be afraid to buy this. And you also have the benefit, of course. This is another one of berries. People love berries bags, so might have some good opportunities there. Panos said, I'm not sure if TA can help, but I'd really like to hear a prediction about Nano and all the BitGrail mess. I can't even remember the name of what this was prior to being called Nano, XRB or something. I never owned it, and I feel sorry for everybody that's involved. I think there was a scam involved with the exchange, the only exchange that really supported it, which is super unfortunate. I don't know enough details really to give you insight. However, I would say that it's dangerous to rely on technical analysis when there's something as fundamentally severe as what you've seen in that scenario. So I would certainly be careful with that. By the way, I'm getting a spinning beach ball. There it goes. I was getting a spinning beach ball for the streaming software, so we'll see if this is working. Can I do Monero and Ubiq or Ubiq? We'll finish with those. I don't think you can copy my color scheme because these are manual, so there's not much I can do there. Sorry. I do like the color scheme, though. When I put together over the period of a couple of days. So Monero's been interesting. its USD chart historically has been on a huge uptrend. Looks like it's recovering, but it mostly looks like the Bitcoin chart, if I had to assign it any label. Nothing overly exciting to look at there. It drew down kind of like everything else. Versus Bitcoin, I have this line drawn here, which was a prior all-time high. Monero's been having a funny looking ranging pattern against Bitcoin. It's really not too far off from some prior all-time highs. This is another one that I mentioned, how I saw some people speculating that maybe it was preparing for a new paradigm, whatever you want to call that. Fundamentally, Monero is pretty great. People love it. It's got its use case really nailed down. It's got a TK cross here on the 3-day, which is interesting. But really, this has been ranging for so long in this channel that you can see the cloud is less useful in that scenario. If I was looking to buy Monero, I would be looking at some of these moving averages and just trying to see when might be the right time to make that play. On the daily, this one was always funny because the best time to buy it over the past year has been when it went below the 200-day moving average, which is typically a sign of a bearish market. But for Monero, that's historically been when it was so oversold that it reacted well from it. This gray one is a 400, which I don't even know why I have on the chart other than it's part of my little script that I made. But you can see right now it just bounced off the 50-day moving average. So it might be the type of play where you could ride it off that trend line and try to catch the top of the channel, and especially if it breaks above that channel. It's got room in terms of its market cap. This is another one that I'm not currently in right now. It does move a little slow. Oh, y'all can't see my screen. Sorry. I didn't see the chat. There it is. So you were just looking at me. My bad. Like 10 people told me they can't see the screen. So yeah, that's my take on Monero. I like Monero fundamentally. I'm not in it right now. It has been moving slow while it's been ranging in the middle of this channel. To me, until it decides where it wants to live, it's not a huge buy spot for me. It's not a sell spot if I'm in it necessarily. I sold it actually when it did this first run up. I was really wanting this move all the way to 0.04 at the time, and it just seemed clear that I wasn't getting it. So I sold it, I think in the 0.028 to 0.03 range. And just really haven't had a reason to get back in it yet. So that's my 2 cents on Monero. Someone said Verge is better than Monero. That's your call. I don't know. I don't have reason to believe that. I don't have reason to think it's a terrible thing to say either. All right. We will finish on Ubiq, and then I think we'll wrap up. I don't know how long we've been on here. As long as I feel like talking. Ubiq has been in a pretty disgusting fake out. I was really excited because Ubiq broke this long-term diagonal, but it also was, I thought, a horizontal resistance that it had really ranged in before. So you can see this big multi-month thing here that it broke down from. It looked like it was going to go tackle that and go retest all-time highs. That ended up being pretty gross of a fake out, and we've moved all the way back, even failed the daily 200 a little bit. you know, this is one of those ones where I wouldn't fault somebody for selling it right now. Personally, I'm just going to wait. I've got a pretty big bag of Ubiq, and fundamentally, I think it's a fine coin. They're slowly bringing on new tokens. They've got several reasons that people like to mine it. There's several reasons why you might just hold on to it longer term, like I'm doing. It's not really giving us signs that we must buy it right now. However, I personally think that it'll have its day in the sun, and I've held it for so long that I'm not gonna dump it and then watch it move on me. So if you wanted to find anything bullish about it, you could say that it's holding the daily cloud here. It is under the Keynesian. These are doubled settings. So that's going to be resistance to get above. But if we break back above the cloud, if the cloud's still bullish, then maybe we'll get a positive move. Ubiq's a decent one to finish on too, because I do think it looks like a lot of alts look like right now, which is, I wouldn't say that it's particularly showing signs of strength. However, it's not like it's, it's not too far off of what we saw in January. And if we're going to have like a alt season or whatever you want to call it, some of these may find a way to move from these levels that don't look very good. Like if I would have looked at this in May, it wouldn't have looked very good either. It would have looked a lot like it looks right now. And then all of a sudden it was just like, bam, there it goes. So sometimes the chart in terms of the trend isn't going to look great, especially because these are so reactive to Bitcoin's price action, and Bitcoin's gone down so much that they went down. And it could break down from here. If it broke below that cloud, if it lost some of this support structure that it has right now, I would be concerned. I really want to see, I'd mentioned this on Twitter, I'd really like to see it maintain the daily 200 around 31, 32K. The fact that it's underneath that right now is concerning. And you can look at a lot of alts and they look just like this. And you got to decide when you're going to cut your losses, and you got to know what your strategy is and what your risk tolerance is. So my advice would just be to be careful. Maybe if you're entering a trade right now, you would wait for the breakout and then buy the breakout. If you're in the coin, maybe set mental stops because you don't want this to go back down to whatever 10, 15K, and that's another 60, 70% from here. For a whole new market cycle, and you go through all that again where alts died all fall, and you have to live through that again over the next few months. So just keep a close eye on your alts. Keep your Bitcoin closer. The game right now is to make more Bitcoin as Bitcoin recovers. And then I guess my finishing thoughts will be that it's been interesting to me to see some people really get afraid of Bitcoin moving down. And when Bitcoin went from 20,000 to 16,000 or 14,000, people weren't moving to USD. But when Bitcoin went from 7 to 8,000, people sold into USD because they thought, oh, well, now we're going to test 6,000. We're still in the period like this below 9,000, below 9,000 stuff, where to me, like, we should be able to look back on this time and think, man, that was pretty affordable Bitcoin relative to what it is now. And I wish I hadn't left that money on the sidelines. So at this point, I'm fully in the market. I don't really plan to be out of the market, certainly not fully, or even partially, unless we broke, I don't even know what, maybe like 7,500. And yeah, the US dollar balance could take a hit before then. But for me, I'm personally not looking to be on the sidelines in any way until maybe we test back in this kind of key zone to find out, is this just one big dead cat bounce and we're going to maintain the bear trend below that 10 to 12,000 zone? And if we go above that, then I will certainly be fully in the market. If we bounce down from that, I'm going to probably be looking to secure my dollar value. But right now I want to make Bitcoin. So I'm doing so by trading altcoins and trying to keep a close eye on the Bitcoin market. But what I see so far, I like in terms of how the market's doing, and we'll see from there. All right. How do I decide which charts to look at each day? I'll finish with that. I just have a list of stuff that I look at. Usually stuff that I own, plus some more. Some that I just watch. So, watch the stuff that you own. Don't try to watch everything in the market. You can't do it. There's too many. There's thousands of these things. I can't chart everything for you either. I would say I keep an eye on probably like 50 coins or so. But you got to do you. All right. Thanks for joining me. Let me know if you have any follow-up questions. I think I got to the majority of them. And with that, I guess I'll catch y'all next time. Have a good one.